This is Brent Richardson, and welcome to the Business Minutia Podcast, where our focus is on the details of business that are often passed over by traditional classes and leadership training. We focus on the stories of real people who have tried, failed, and learned through their experiences and are willing to share their lessons with others.
Brent, this week we're talking about purpose, and I don't quite understand what purpose has to do with business. So can you help me with that?
Well, when we were talking about this before we recorded, I think when I look back at my career and why this matters, this is one of the most common questions that I get from people. How are you okay working in a corporate environment? Does it not just destroy your soul? And of course, there are parts of it that really do. But to me, it comes down to understanding your why and what your sense of purpose is. And you need to have some sense of purpose. Now, I think some people would be like, how can you possibly derive any part of that from a corporate setting? Well, it's impossible for me to describe this without telling a little bit of my own personal journey, right? When did I get to a point where I realized that purpose mattered from a corporate standpoint? And it's when I quit. Really, it's when I think my first few years in the corporate environment, I realized it was destroying my soul.
Right.
This is not working for me. I don't get any sense of purpose for this. I did not. I always had grand ambitions for my life. I knew I was different. We all probably do. We think we feel different. There's something specific. Maybe it's a American individualism or something, but I felt there's more for me. There's something grander for me that is more than just this rote, mundane existence. I had a higher expectation. Always did, right? And so when I got out and I got a job that started to feel rote and mundane, I said, nah, this is not going to work. I'm not going to die here. I am not going to just punch a clock. This is not going to happen. I did not go through 4 years of engineering school for this, right?
Yeah.
And electrical engineering, one of the toughest programs to get through, so much math. There's no way I'm not going to do this. And I quit. And because I wasn't getting any sense of purpose. I felt like it just didn't have any meaning behind it.
Okay,
right?
so walk me through the quit thing.
I just had enough, and I said, that's enough. I'm not doing this anymore. And I was shocked people. They're like, what are you going to do? I don't know. Something else. Now, luckily, I was valued enough that they needed me, and they said,
Right.
that I probably had a little bit of leverage. The timing of when I quit, they really did need me for some projects that were really critical, and I negotiated a part-time deal. So I actually I was like, all right, I got to find something else to do where I get some sense of value out of my life besides just, can I ship more widgets? It's not doing it for me.
Right.
And I went to work at a nonprofit. And I did that full time, and I did my corporate gig part time. So I was working crazy hours, but I loved it. I enjoyed that I enjoyed that time because the profit work was scratching this itch that I had about. I felt meaning behind it. I felt some sense of purpose behind it, and in the process of doing that, I realized that. You know why I enjoy this? Because I'm helping people. Because I was doing something that seemed to matter. It made a difference. Is that the answer for everybody? Not at all. But my point is you've got to figure out what your why is. What's that thing that what is that sense of purpose? And that's what we want to talk about a little bit this week.
Brent, you always refer back to a Mike Tyson quote. Help me with that quote.
One of my favorite boxers. Cost me some money in the past. This last fight that I watched with him, I had some money on that. I'm talking small time, not a gambling problem. I had some like $10, I think, with my cousin back in the day.
Right.
And I'm dating myself. This was a long time ago. And he wound up biting Evander Holyfield's ear off. And I lost all the money out of the deal. So I was pretty upset with him. But yeah, he has a famous quote. He says, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. And to me, I love this quote because it highlights the value of purpose. Because if you're going to tackle a challenge, if you're going to do something difficult, you are going to run into problems. And you're going to have some, as people will call it, dark nights of the soul, where you're like, this isn't working. I want to quit. You're going to have those times of despair where it's difficult. If you're tackling something challenging, you're going to have those cases. If you don't have a sense of purpose to back why you're doing what you're doing, you will bail so fast. It's so easy to give up on that challenge, and you'll wind up just working on something that's mediocre.
Right. And I mean, for me, I have to literally have an index card over my desk that says, this is your purpose.
Yeah.
So that everything I'm looking back to is, okay, I am trying to fulfill that purpose.
Absolutely. It's foundational to
Yeah.
me. Because and if you're going to accomplish anything significant, you have to have this foundational, which is what I loved about the Ken Yankee episode where he talks about, I've had so many people tell me, man, that was really meaningful for me. Because you've got to have that answer to why. If you don't understand why you're doing something, when things get tough, you're going to find yourself off in who knows where, because you're going to let the wind decide where you're going, right? I think, and when the challenges come, you're just going to quit, right? And without that sense of purpose backing you, you're not going to be able to weather the storms that are so. Now, at the same time, you can't just be sitting in a storm beating your head against a wall. There needs to be some things that make sense. That's not what we're saying, but having that why behind it, it gives you where you're deriving that purpose. Now, then we're going to talk a little bit about, what are some of the things that people use for that purpose, right? What are some of the examples of, shouldn't your sense of purpose just be to grow wealth,
make money,
and to make money? Is that
right.
is that not just the sufficient reason to exist and go do what you're doing
I
and to
need
be
to
successful?
buy a third house and a new Tesla.
Yeah, and you know what? Money buys you options,
Right.
Right. Money buys you options, but eventually you're going to find it, or at least I find it to be a very near-term motivator. Now, this is a hard thing to communicate to people who got no money, right? Especially if you're starving, it's a different game, right? If you're just trying to pay the bills, then yeah, there's certain things that you're going to have to you may have to do things that you don't get tremendous purpose out of. You may have to pump gas. That's always the joke that I've had is when this job doesn't work out, I know they still pay people to pump gas in Oregon,
right?
And I'll just go do that gig because I love it up there anyway. But the reality is there once you start to make a certain level of income that your basic needs are being met, right? Then you start working on your dreams. You start
right.
working about the things, I'd love to have, a big screen TV, a new sofa, whatever the thing is that, you've got it in your brain that's what success looks like. You start to meet those needs. Then it turns into options. Which sofa do you want? Which kind of big screen TV? Which kind of those things? And I'm just going to tell you that if you continue to chase that rabbit, okay, you don't have to agree with me, right? This will sound preachy. You don't have to agree with me. I'm telling you, I think you're going to find that to be a very shallow motivator. You're going to lose interest in that as a base motivator to take on significant challenges pretty quickly.
Right. I think there's a huge difference between having significance and having success.
Yeah, and that's why we talk about. That's one of the things on our website is is that it's all about being significant more so than just successful.
Right.
It's not just by chance that we chose that word. As I'm a big fan of being significant more so than successful. Success is so different for different people, right? But I'd way rather be significant than I would necessarily I'm using quotes successful, depending on whose eyes that's seen. If you chase this rabbit down the hole of I want as much money as possible, and that's my motivator because it's going to buy me options, and I want all the options possible, and I'm just going to keep chasing that, you're going to find that it's that void that you're trying to fill, that void you're trying to fill in a sense of purpose, you're going to find it doesn't fill it. Again, you don't have to agree with me, right? But I'm telling you that's what I think you're going to find. That's certainly what I've found, is it does not fill that void. The void that's there is purpose.
Right.
You need more than that to fill that void. You can try to fill it with all kinds of things, and we'll talk about some of the examples of what people do fill those voids with. But I'm telling you that void is purpose, and if you don't address and answer that for yourself, which requires you to really self-reflect and figure out, it's not an easy thing to do. Right. But you're going to have to be honest with yourself. And it may be that it's like, I just want that thing. I want that. I want the Tesla. I want the Model S. That's what my thing is. Write that down. That's fine. Let that be your initial motivator and go chase that rabbit. I'm telling you, I think if you don't have a greater sense of purpose behind what you're doing, so then what? You got that. Then what? What's next? Where does it end? Take it out to its farthest degree. Right? That's why you see folks that are outrageously successful, outrageously wealthy, right? They continue to do their job many times. Right? I don't know how many times I've seen these executives, senior vice presidents that I've had a chance to talk to and travel with. And I'm sitting here thinking, these are multimillionaires.
Right.
And they still work. Why? Because that's not their purpose. They don't derive a sense of purpose based on that. They derive a sense of purpose from the competition, from the political part of the job, or from the taking on that next challenge, or from the challenge that they're up against there, or some other thing that they're deriving their purpose from. But it ain't just the money, right?
Yeah, and you recently watched a documentary, right, about all of the NFL players who had made so much money in their first couple of years.
Yeah.
But then found themselves just completely broke.
NFL, NBA, you name it. All of those sports. Great documentary out there that you can go watch of the percentage of them that wind up filing bankruptcy. It's crazy. It's outrageously high. Most of them don't wind up very successful. Same with lottery winners, right?
Exactly right.
What percentage of lottery winners wind up divorced? Right?
And if money was the key to happiness, then every lottery winner ought to be the happiest people on earth.
And maybe they are happy. I don't know, but I just know based on the divorce rate that I'd say, well, maybe not.
Right.
And also, been my experience is when you start to fulfill some of those dreams. And again, don't get me wrong. If somebody dropped $100K in my lap tomorrow, I'd be like, Model S, huh? I'd love to have at least if I was commuting every day, I'd be like, it'd be nice to have a nice car. It'd be nice to have whatever this thing is, right? Add the thing that my son and I are constantly thinking about is what the new tool is we're going to add to our woodworking expedition. Just that new tool? Well, and even when you get into the tools, what about that one? I like this one a little better. Well, it's a little more expensive. That's okay. I like it because it does it. These are all things that are not necessarily filling that void that's in you, but they're not necessarily bad. I'm not saying they're bad, but if you're using them as a method to fill that void, I'm telling you, you're going to be disappointed. So Jamie, we're talking about money as one of the things that people use to fill that void of purpose. What are some other examples of things that people will try?
I see people focusing on family as a way to find their purpose in life, and that is such a trap.
Doesn't sound like a great answer though?
No, but it doesn't work.
You don't like family?
I love family.
You don't think family's important?
No, I love our family.
You got kids you don't care about?
But
what's the trap?
The trap here is that every young adult makes their own decisions when they get older.
Yeah.
You can be the best parent in the world, and sometimes your kids still make these decisions that aren't really aligned with what you would like them to make decisions about.
It can be a very powerful motivator for your life for about 10 to 15 years. Has been my experience.
Right.
And then your kid gets to the point where they need to be making some decisions on their own. And if you're finding all your purpose through them, you start to live vicariously through them. You start to trying to control what they do. Dangerous.
Right. And then you end up being retired and your friends are asking you, what your kids are doing? What your kids are doing? What your kids are doing? And unless you align with what your kids have actually chosen to do with their lives, all of a sudden you feel like a failure. Yeah. You're pegged as a failure.
Well, and then what happens when the kid moves out? All of a sudden your sense of purpose is what? Follow them along?
Right. And what if your kid ends up working for a nonprofit and making no money?
Yeah. Are you not successful now?
Right.
Right. And I just find it to be a good short, again, it's maybe a little longer term than a lot of motivators, but it's still, you've got 10 to 15 years and then you're going to turn into this helicopter control freak parent, right? Which is not healthy.
Right. And it's not fair to your kids. It puts a lot of pressure on your kids for their life choices to end up benefiting you or hurting you.
Yeah.
That's not fair.
Yeah.
It's their life. Yeah. It's not your life.
Yeah. What about just the work? What about just the job itself? Like, I just derive my sense of purpose from this job. I don't care about the money. I just love the job.
Okay. So if your company goes bankrupt tomorrow?
Yeah.
Then what?
Absolutely. And most of these companies, folks, it's not a democracy. We've talked about this before. It's a dictatorship. And tomorrow they could decide, hey, employee 215386, what was your name again? Yeah, we're done with you. You're out of here. It's also a dangerous place to derive your sense of purpose if you're an employee for someone else. Now, if you're running your own business, if you don't like the boss, it's your problem, right? But that's where I think people who can maybe have that answer, if it's a sense of purpose that they derive from a business that they run. That it's their heart's passion.
Right.
Right. Labor of love, as they say.
Right. But it's a challenge if you say, okay, I can't have my sense of purpose be in my family. I can't have my sense of purpose be in where I'm making money, in my job. then where are you supposed to make your sense of purpose?
Well, and can it be those things? I think it can. We're just challenging that sometimes you can make those the things and there probably shouldn't be. No one can answer this question for a person but themselves, right? Let's be clear. There's no answer for this. You have to sort this out for yourself. I think one thing I think to think a little bit about is how you supplement your purpose, or how you, first of all, you need to figure out what it is. What's the thing that when you wake up in the morning or you're going to bed at night, you'd be like, I feel like I just accomplished something. I feel like my life has some meaning. I feel like this matters now. You got to sort and find that. That's a journey that only you can take, but you've got to figure that out. So for me, when I realized I just helping people, doing something that I can help people, there's all kinds of different ways I would say. So today, do I derive great sense of purpose in my corporate job? I do, because I'm helping people.
Right.
And when in the days where I finish my day and I know I help someone, that's very rewarding for me. I sleep well at night when I'm doing that. And I try to do that every day. But when I'm actually helping people, that's one way. The other way that I derive a great sense of purpose about my job is people ask me, how do you tolerate some of the things that you got to deal with at a big company? Because there's a lot of red tape. Okay,
a lot of politics,
a lot of bureaucracy. I'm also fundraising.
That's
the majority of what I do is fundraising for something else. Right? Now, everybody's fundraising for something, whether you're fundraising for the Model S
or a new boat
or whatever the thing you're fundraising for. That, and again, I'm what we talked about earlier. I think you'll find those to be short-term motivators, right? And I've done all those things and continue to do them. I'm chasing a bandsaw right now. If anybody knows what a bandsaw is, woodworking is one of my passions. And so I'm doing all this research on bandsaws, and they're expensive, but I want the best one, right? And I don't want to buy it twice. And so I'm guilty of this too, right? I'll chase those things too. And I'd love to have a Model S. I've got buddies that drive them and they're awesome. But you're going to find those to be short-term motivators. If that was my primary motivator, I know this about myself now. I'd get there and I'd be disappointed. Right. So what am I fundraising for? Well, we have some side hustles that we work on that we use for giving. So we give quite a bit. We didn't build it. We helped finish off a school in Belize last year. We were looking at some projects in Honduras.
Yep.
We have a nonprofit that we've kicked off within another nonprofit that we worked with that's called Wonder Voyage Legacy. Legacy projects are a big part of what we do, and we raise a lot of money for that. And so that's what I'm doing every day. I'm going to work raising money for these other projects. And I derive a great sense of purpose, and it allows me to, when the storms hit and the politics hit and I roll my eyes and, good grief, here comes more bureaucracy. I go, you know what I'm doing this for? And I have my back to the wall, and I remember that.
And what's really, it may seem strange to people, but when they come into our house and they look at our refrigerator doesn't have our kids' artwork, right? Because the youngest is now 13, oldest is almost 17. Our refrigerator has some kids from India on it. And these are kids that we feed, clothe, and educate every month. And they are our passion project, right? Because they would not have what they have unless we were giving to them on a monthly basis.
Yes.
And I think that those kind of visuals for us are incredibly important.
Yes. Once you know what your why is, put it all over places, all over your life.
And that's not for anybody else to come in and go, oh,
right?
That's cool that you're doing that. That is for us.
That's for me. I'm uncomfortable even talking about it on the podcast.
I understand.
Because I know what it sounds like. It sounds like, oh, these guys do such great things. Yay. No, man, I'd rather not talk to you about it at all. And I'm giving you tip of the iceberg of the stuff that we do, because it's not about me. It's about you figuring out for yourself what's the thing that motivates and drives you when things get nasty. When things get difficult, you've got to have the thing that's, you know what, I'm just going to power through this. And you got to think past just 6 months from now. Because those kinds of projects and the long-term vision that I have for how my life needs to end, or how I want it to look when it's done, right? And I want to talk about that in a second, because I want to recommend a book to people to read. But those kinds of things are good long-term or good longer range motivators, but sometimes I need a nearer term thing than that. Right. And that's where I think a thing like a new car, or, whatever the thing is, having those in place, right? For me, woodworking is a part of that. I those are really great motivators. I'm going to power through this day, because tonight I'm going to get 2 hours of solid time that I control, that no one else can steal from me.
Right.
And I'm going to build something. I don't know what it's going to be yet. I actually do. I'll keep a running list of what I want to build next when I get free time. Or if it's fishing, whatever. Those are things that I think can still provide oddly, they're not grand senses of purpose, but I still think that you can derive some sense of purpose in that. Now, if you put all your, goals and dreams for life and the reason you're doing what you're doing into, well, I'm just wanted to build this cutting board, you're going to get there and be like, now what? Right.
Right.
But they can be good short-term motivators.
So I'm going to age us for a minute here, Brent. I remember back in middle school, high school time frame, there was a box, a tombstone pizza box, right? And they would say, what do you want on your tombstone? And they were selling pepperoni and sausage and all that kind of stuff. But our school teachers took that to another level. What do you want on your graveside tombstone?
Yeah.
And we all had to write our own little, in quotation, what do you want to be remembered for?
Right.
And that's a hard thing for middle school, high school. I want to be a mom. I want to be a whatever.
Sure.
If you were to look at that now, what would you want on your tombstone?
And it's a common question that you get when they send you through these kind of career, trying to figure out what you're going to be in life kind of questions. That's kind of the way they go. There's all different versions of it. There's a bunch of them in the spiritual religious world, in the sense that you've got purpose-driven life and these types of things from Rick Warren.
Or writing your eulogy.
There's all these different ways that people challenge with the same kinds of questions. Most of those I find to be, they're okay. They're decent. Like the old joke from Office Space where the guy says the question's garbage because if it was always like that, there'd be no janitors because no one would be clean crap up, right? So, but at the same time, so maybe I'll give you my favorite example of those in terms of the way I process this. Well, the one I will recommend is by one of my favorite authors, a guy named Donald Miller, who also has a really great podcast called Story Brand,
right,
that spun off out of, or well, I don't know if it directly came out of, but it started coming after he wrote this book. I think he came to a revelation about this concept of what kind of story is your life. Yep. Right? What story are you telling with your life? If you project it out to the end, right? What does that story look like? You could say, write your eulogy, write your tombstone, write your epitaph, all those types. It's the same concept.
Exactly.
What do you want this thing to look like when you're done? And that's fine and good thing to write out and think about. You should, but then back it up. Back it up. What are the decisions that you're making on a monthly basis, on a quarterly basis, on a yearly basis to live a good story? Right. This had a big effect on me, I think. I'd started thinking this way well before I read the book, and I think Donald just has a great way of articulating things that were already rattling in my brain, right? Yep. And the name of the book is, what was it again?
1,000,000 Miles in 1,000 Years.
1,000,000 Miles in 1,000 Years. And it talks about living a good story. And when you start thinking in terms of, I only have so many years.
Yep.
What is my story going to look like when I'm done with it? When you start thinking like that, you start going, what does tomorrow need to look like so that the story starts moving in the direction that I want?
Yep.
That's big to me. That starts to, and then you start thinking about this idea of what is my purpose? What is the why, I think, can filter through when you think about what that another example, I have another exercise you can take your mind through is that I've said, I think I stole this from a TV show I was watching, but it was with, I think, a coach talking to an executive, and maybe it's the show Billions. And they were saying, close your eyes and I want you to think about your retirement. Where are you? What are your surroundings? Who are you with? Who are the people that you're around? And then back up where you are today and think about the relationships and the people that are around you today. And can you envision those people getting you to that place and what you're doing getting you to that place? And if you can't, what changes do you need to make to get to that place? There's a disconnect there. And if you're not taking steps, now, here's where I think it can get tricky and where I struggle with that purpose-driven life concept and some of those things is what would happen if you knew the end right now?
Oh, I would try to jump to it.
You'd try to jump to it.
Yep.
I think we talked about this in the past. I think that's been a revelation that I had as well. If I knew what the end looked like, I would botch it. I would mess it up, or I wouldn't take the journey to begin with. Right. I had a really great friend, had this great story. I can't remember if I've shared on the podcast in the past, but he had a chance to go do some hiking before some people were going to arrive, and he had to meet him at the airport. And he went to go do this hike, and people had told him, yeah, it's a really great hike. You're going to hike up to this corner, and you're going to have this really great view, this incredible view. And he's like, all right, well, it was really cloudy. So he started to take the hike, and he was kind of struggling with similar kind of conversations or thought process in his life. What am I here for? What am I trying to do? And he gets up to this ledge and he looks out to see, the view, and all he sees is the next ridge. So he has to hike to the next ridge. Well, I guess the view's at that ridge. Hikes to that ridge. It's so cloudy you can't see. And then he just sees another ridge. This continues and continues, and he goes ridge to ridge to ridge. Now he's looking at his watch going, am I going to make this in time?
Right,
And he's sitting here thinking, if I'd known it was going to be like this, I wouldn't have come. Well, guess what? He eventually crests to a spot, the clouds open, he gets this incredible view, sits down and has this revelation, like God telling him, if I told you where you're going to end up, you wouldn't take the journey.
Right.
You wouldn't come along if I told you all that. If we know the end, we just mess it up. So it's a weird paradox because you need to be thinking about where you want to go, but you also need to be flexible to change.
Right. And the challenge for me is I think that I am wired differently than you are in that you are what people would call a people person. I am very much a task person. So I get so zeroed in on a task that I need to accomplish. I forget about the people and the relationships along the way because I'm just trying to check the boxes off on my checklist. And it has become more of a challenge for me to make sure that I am taking those relationships along the way to accomplish what I ultimately want to accomplish. So it is who else has the same end goals in mind, and making sure that I'm not leaving those people behind and I'm not abandoning those people. I'm not forgetting those people, and we are all going on the journey together.
And I find those relationships change depending on what journey I'm on.
Absolutely.
Because I find my journey to change all the time.
Yep.
And so when we used to talk about where do you see yourself in 20 years, I don't think like that anymore. And I know that sounds opposite of what we're saying. You need to think out what your final story should look, wants to look like. But I don't mean in terms of who your employer is.
I agree.
Right.
Right. So we are raising 3 teenagers right now that have their own ideas of what they want to accomplish. And what I am trying to instill in them is, as you are going along this journey, you may think that you want to go to Ireland. You may think that you want to travel to Japan, wherever it is that you want to go. But know that if you're going that direction and then you change course a little bit, that's not a failure.
It's not a failure at all.
Not at all.
Not at all. You got to be flexible and dynamic to adjust as you go. But I think you still need to be constantly reflecting on why. What's driving you? What do you want to go to Japan for? What's the driving purpose that you're trying to achieve? I'm telling you, if you can't answer this question, you are going to find yourself floundering.
Yeah.
You're going to be out in the wind. We'll decide where you're going. You're going to have this void in your soul you cannot fill, right? And you're going to have one religion telling you they got the answer and another telling you the other. I'm telling you the answer's in you. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Now I am a Christian. Okay. I'm a follower of Christ. I should be telling you, well, Christ is the answer. Okay. That's my opinion for my life. I can't tell you what yours is for your life. And this is not a religion thing, right? But it's that you're going to get tug of war from all these different directions. If you don't take the time to self-reflect on this, okay, and figure out what is the thing that your soul needs.
Right.
And be honest with yourself about what that is. What a wasted life.
What is the core of you?
What a wasted life. You only got so many days, guys and girls. You only got so many days. You got to figure out what that is for you. And you got to think about really process what that looks like. And then look back at what you're doing on a daily basis, on a monthly basis. Does it reflect that value that you have?
But there's still going to be a 9 to 5 for people. And there's still going to be a what is paying the bills at the end of the month.
Do that too.
Yeah.
These are not
those do not define who you are.
Exclusive. Absolutely. Right. I'm going to go back to what I've heard, what Ken said in our podcast that really, I think, captures it well, that it's more about who you are than what you do.
Yes.
Because who you are can change based on what you do. My employer could be gone tomorrow and I'm still who I am and I'm wired how I am.
That's right.
And that how I feel that void will not change.
Right.
It may adapt and tweak here or there, but it's not associated with my employer. It's not associated with the degree that I have or my alma mater or my friends, right? So, but that's me. That's, I know that about myself. So this self-awareness journey, you've got to figure this out for you.
And I think that there's an underlying craving that every human has to figure out what the purpose for their life is. And it doesn't matter what religion, what faith, what non-faith, anything, what your walk of life is. You have a craving to figure out, why am I here?
Yeah. And you don't have to quit your job to
That's right.
I think that's one area I think that you're hitting. I want to come back to that's ties in really well. I think early on, I when I quit, I thought, well, I can't do that here. I felt this compelling urge. Like, I think the void in me needs to be filled with this, but I can't do it here. Why? Why is it? It's not a dichotomy like that.
Right.
It's not so black and white. Make it a side hustle. That's where I think we've learned is we fundraise for the things that fill that void for us.
Right.
Right. And if you don't find a way to do this, you are going to be a slave to somebody else. Right. And it's just going to be really difficult for you to find the happiness.
Yep.
I mean, it's going to be really challenging. Is it possible? Yeah, maybe. You keep chasing the next high.
Right. And we have taken people along with us on journeys, on legacy voyages, right? And they're like, oh, there is something so much
awesome is
bigger
it?
out
This
here.
is why I lead pilgrimages in the summer. People are like, don't use all your vacation time for other people and volunteer this to take people on pilgrimages, because that's what we do on a pilgrimage.
Yeah.
We want you to come to this revelation where you realize, I think this is what there's a whole other world here that I didn't think about. And that self-reflection time has this really big impact on people, right? And how awesome is it to see people come to that realization?
That's right.
Right. It was about a year ago today.
Yep.
Where we got to experience that with a friend of ours that got a chance to travel with us, and to see them go, all right, this makes sense. This is what I've been missing.
Yep.
Right. And the effect it has on a person, it is magnetic. Everybody will recognize it. People will be like, I had somebody ask me, what did you do to that person? I didn't do nothing to that person, right? They just had this self-reflection, and they said, I'm deriving a tremendous sense of purpose from this. And I didn't have that itch being scratched in all the problems I was trying to solve in my day job. Absolutely can relate to that, man. Now, does that mean that's what your solution is? Not at all. You got to figure out what that is for you. But if you don't wrestle with this and come up with this answer, I'm telling you, you're gonna end up someplace, and I don't know that you're gonna be happy with it. Right.
Right.
It ain't gonna fill that void.
Right. So the challenge that I have for all of you this week is that old middle school, high school thing that was challenged to us. What do you want on your tombstone? What do you want to be remembered by?
Write your eulogy out and then work backwards.
Absolutely.
Deep stuff. I'm very passionate about this topic, so it probably came across a little preachy, but so be it. That's all right. That's what you get. Hey, you get what you pay for, and baby, it's free.